What if I told you that the biggest World Cup in football history hasn't even kicked off yet, and it's already pricing millions of fans out of the dream? Because right now, before a single ball has been kicked, before the final groups are even drawn, World Cup 2026 ticket prices are already shaping up to be the most insane, controversial, and divisive prices football has ever seen. And this isn't just another FIFA cash grab story. This is about how the World Cup is quietly transforming from a global festival of the people into a luxury entertainment product designed for corporations, influencers, and the ultra-rich. Because when FIFA announced that the 2026 World Cup would be hosted across the United States, Canada, and Mexico, fans around the world celebrated, believing this would be the most accessible World Cup ever, with massive stadiums, world-class infrastructure, and a chance for North American fans to finally experience football's greatest tournament live. But what nobody realized at the time was that FIFA wasn't just planning the biggest World Cup ever, they were planning the most expensive one ever. And the warning signs were there from the very beginning, because expanding the tournament to 48 teams meant more matches, more travel, more security, more logistics, and more opportunities to monetize every single aspect of the fan experience. And once FIFA partnered deeply with US-style sports business models, everything changed, because American sports culture doesn't treat tickets like access to a public celebration, it treats them like premium entertainment assets, similar to the Super Bowl, NBA Finals, or major boxing events, where scarcity, exclusivity, and dynamic pricing rule everything. And this is where the nightmare begins for ordinary fans, because unlike past World Cups where fans could realistically save up and attend at least one or two matches, early pricing models, hospitality packages, and leaked projections for 2026 suggest that even group stage matches could cost several $100s for standard seats, while high-demand games featuring teams like the USA, Mexico, Brazil, Argentina, or England could skyrocket into four figures before resale markets even get involved. And when you factor in travel across three massive countries, hotel prices in host cities like New York, Los Angeles, Miami, Dallas, and Atlanta, plus food, transport, and visas, suddenly attending the World Cup becomes a $5,000 to $10,000 experience for a single fan. And that's being conservative, because hospitality packages, which FIFA is aggressively promoting, already hinted prices that rival Super Bowl luxury suites, with some multi-match packages projected to cost more than an average American's monthly rent. And here's the most shocking part. FIFA knows exactly what it's doing, because the United States is the first World Cup host where FIFA fully expects fans to accept inflated prices as normal, because American sports fans are already conditioned to pay $1,000 for a Super Bowl ticket, $500 for courtside NBA seats, and premium prices for playoff games, and FIFA believes football fans will eventually accept the same logic. But football has never worked like that, because the World Cup has always been about accessibility, about fans from every background, every country, and every income level coming together in one place, singing, chanting, celebrating, and suffering together. But in 2026, that atmosphere is at serious risk, because if only wealthy fans can afford to be inside the stadiums, the soul of the World Cup disappears, and what replaces it is a sanitized corporate spectacle designed for television and sponsors, rather than real supporters. And this is why so many lifelong fans are already angry, because they feel betrayed by FIFA's promise that the expanded World Cup would be more inclusive, when in reality it's becoming more exclusive than ever. And the irony is painful, because football is the world's game, precisely because it doesn't belong to elites. It belongs to the streets, the parks, the neighborhoods, and the working class. Yet World Cup 2026 risks becoming the first tournament where watching from home is the only realistic option for millions of fans, even in the host countries. And this raises a terrifying question. If fans in the USA, Canada, and Mexico can't afford to attend matches in their own countries, what chance do fans from Africa, Asia, or South America have? Fans who already face visa barriers, currency disadvantages, and long-distance travel costs, because for many of them, attending a World Cup has always been a once-in-a-lifetime dream, saved for over decades, but 2026 might shatter that dream completely. And FIFA's response to these concerns has been predictably vague, talking about tiered pricing, fan-first initiatives, and affordable options, without ever clearly defining what affordable actually means in a country where $100 is considered cheap for a sporting event. And when you add dynamic pricing algorithms, resale platforms, scalpers, and corporate allocations into the mix, prices don't just rise, they explode, because once demand outpaces supply, the market takes over. And history tells us exactly what happens next, because we've seen it with the Super Bowl, where average fans have been priced out entirely. And World Cup 2026 risks following the same path, especially for cutoff stage matches, semifinals, and the final, which many analysts believe could become the most expensive football tickets ever sold, surpassing even Champions League finals and past World Cup records. And while FIFA will celebrate record-breaking revenue numbers, sponsorship deals, and global viewership, the real cost will be paid by the fans who built the World Cup into what it is today. Because football without fans isn't football, it's just a televised product. And what makes this even more frustrating is that FIFA doesn't need to do this, because the World Cup already generates billions in revenue. But instead of protecting accessibility, FIFA is pushing the limits of monetization to see just how much fans are willing to pay. And World Cup 2026 is the perfect testing ground because of America's wealth, corporate culture, and massive media market. And this experiment could permanently change the future of the tournament, because if 2026 succeeds financially despite fan backlash, future World Cups may follow the same model, pushing prices higher and higher until attending a World Cup becomes a privilege rather than a right. And the saddest part is that this shift may not go unnoticed by casual viewers who only see packed stadiums on TV, not realizing that many of those seats are filled by sponsors, VIPs, influencers, and corporate guests rather than real supporters. And when the chants feel quieter, the atmosphere feels flatter, and the passion feels diluted, people will wonder what went wrong without realizing that it started with ticket prices. And yet, despite all of this, hope still exists because fan pressure has changed FIFA decisions before, and if enough fans speak out, boycott overpriced packages, and demand transparency, there is still a chance to preserve some level of accessibility. But time is running out, because every month that passes brings us closer to a World Cup that feels less like a celebration of football and more like a luxury sports expo. And as 2026 approaches, fans around the world must ask themselves a hard question. Is this the future we want for the World Cup, or is this the moment where football finally draws a line and reminds FIFA who this game truly belongs to? Because if World Cup 2026 becomes remembered not for goals, drama, and history, but for outrageous prices and empty dreams, then no amount of revenue will ever justify the loss of football's soul.
And if World Cup 2026 truly becomes the moment where football crosses the line from a global people's game into a corporate luxury product, then the consequences won't end when the final whistle blows. Because what happens in 2026 will quietly rewrite the rules for every World Cup that follows. And this is where the conversation becomes even more uncomfortable, because FIFA isn't just selling tickets, it's selling a precedent, a new standard that future hosts will be forced to match or exceed, meaning higher prices won't be a temporary problem, they'll become the baseline. And the moment fans accept this model, it becomes irreversible, because the next host nations will be told that record-breaking revenue is the true measure of success, not atmosphere, not accessibility, and not fan culture. And nowhere is this shift more dangerous than in the United States, because American sports economics operate on the idea that fans are consumers first and supporters second. And once football fully absorbs that mindset, everything changes. Because football has always survived on emotional loyalty rather than transactional value. But FIFA sees something else in the American market. It sees endless spending power, corporate sponsorship, and a population trained to accept high prices as the cost of elite entertainment. And this is why World Cup 2026 feels less like a celebration and more like a stress test, designed to see how much resistance fans will put up before finally giving in. And the data FIFA collects in 2026 will shape pricing strategies for decades. And while fans argue online, FIFA's algorithms are already calculating demand curves, resale multipliers, and optimal price points to extract maximum revenue without triggering mass backlash. And this is why the outrage feels ignored. Because as long as stadiums sell out, FIFA will consider the experiment a success, regardless of who actually fills the seats. And this brings us to another hidden cost of insane ticket prices: the slow erosion of football culture inside stadiums. Because true atmosphere isn't created by people attending a match once for a bucket list experience. It's created by fans who live and breathe the game, who travel for their teams, who sing for 90 minutes even when their team is losing. And when those fans are replaced by tourists, corporate guests, and influencers chasing content, the stadium becomes quieter, flatter, and more predictable. And anyone who has watched a Champions League final in recent years already knows this feeling, because many of those finals felt sterile despite the stakes. And World Cup 2026 risks magnifying that problem on a global scale, because this won't be one final, it will be an entire tournament built on the same pricing philosophy. And the irony is brutal, because FIFA markets the World Cup as a celebration of diversity and unity, while quietly building barriers that exclude the very people who embody that diversity. And this exclusion hits hardest in regions where football isn't just a sport, it's identity. Because for fans from Africa, South America, and parts of Asia, attending the World Cup has always been an act of devotion, not consumption. But in 2026, devotion may no longer be enough, because money will decide who gets to participate and who is left watching from afar. And this creates another uncomfortable reality, that World Cup 2026 may deepen the cultural divide between football's traditional heartlands and its commercial future. Because while Europe and South America provided the passion, history, and mythology of the game, the financial center of gravity is now shifting toward North America, and FIFA is willing to risk alienating legacy fans in exchange for long-term commercial security. And that trade-off might make sense on a spreadsheet, but football has never thrived on spreadsheets alone. It thrives on emotion, memory, and belonging. And once those are compromised, the damage isn't immediately visible, but it's permanent. And this is why some critics argue that World Cup 2026 isn't just expensive, it's symbolic, because it represents the moment when FIFA openly chose profit over principle. And the most painful part is that many fans feel powerless, because unlike leagues or clubs, the World Cup doesn't have weekly accountability. It appears once every 4 years, creates massive hype, extracts massive revenue, and disappears, leaving fans with nothing but memories and frustration. And by the time people realize what has been lost, it's already too late to reverse. And yet history shows us that football fans are not as powerless as they feel. Because meaningful change has always come from collective pressure, from empty seats, from visible protests, from sustained criticism that sponsors cannot ignore. And sponsors, more than FIFA, are sensitive to public image, because brands do not want to be associated with exclusion, inequality, and greed. And if World Cup 2026 becomes known globally as the tournament that priced out its own supporters, that reputation will follow FIFA and its partners for years. And this is why the next 2 years are critical, because pricing decisions are still being finalized.